What if I told you that beneath your feet, the depths of the ocean conceal traces of a predator that should never have vanished? That the seafloor bears scars no known creature could have made? They haven't told you everything. Forget everything you think you know about sharks. Because once, not millions of years ago, but just a breath in the scale of time, there was a creature so immense it swallowed whales whole, as if they were nothing more than sardines. Agassiz Megalodon. Its name means big tooth, but that's only the beginning. It didn't disappear, it was erased. And the real question is, why? What you're about to uncover will change the way you see the ocean, forever. Before humans even dreamed of crossing oceans, before the pyramids, before the extinction of the dinosaurs, a dark lineage was already tracing its dominance in the primitive seas. Let's go back, approximately 20 million years ago, on a planet still adjusting after the cataclysm that wiped out the dinosaurs. The seas became a chaotic laboratory of evolution. And among the candidates to reign, one emerged with a single strategy: to become colossal. The Megalodon didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the result of a long and violent evolutionary career that began with its ancestors, the Agassiz obliques, a shark that sailed the seas of the Paleocene just after the Cretaceous mass extinction. That predecessor was not small, but he still played in modest leagues. As the millennia passed, pressured by the abundance of gigantic prey, primitive whales, robust cetaceans, and enormous turtles, an iron law prevailed: grow or die. Let's think of the Megalodon not as a simple animal, but as a weapon of natural selection perfected by hunger and time. Its body was a biological submarine up to 18 meters long, with a jaw that opened 2 meters wide and 18-centimeter teeth, each as large as an outstretched human hand, sharp as freshly broken obsidian. His teeth were more than a set of blades. They were a workshop of perpetual death. Sharks replaced teeth continually. The Megalodon could produce up to 40,000 teeth throughout its life. Imagine a marine saw that constantly repairs itself. A predator that never stopped sharpening. Its habitat was vast, from temperate coasts to tropical waters, covering all the world's oceans known at that time. Fossils have been found from Europe to America, from Japan to New Zealand. His empire was global. The ocean was not a place. It was his kingdom, and in that kingdom, the prey was gigantic. Baleen whales, primitive sperm whales, colossal seals, animals that today seem incomprehensible to us. To the Megalodon, they were simple targets. This is where you should stop for a moment. Imagine not only the size, but the speed. Studies on the anatomy of its vertebrae suggest that it could reach speeds of 30 to 40 km/h, faster than most modern prey, thanks to hyperdense musculature and a hydrodynamic structure designed for lethal ambushes. His technique was not a superficial attack. It was launched from the bottom up, like an underwater bullet, aiming directly at the whale's chest or tail fin. A single bite could fracture bones 30 centimeters thick. He didn't hunt, he executed. And here the first crack in the official story emerges. How did an animal so perfect, so adaptable, so invincible disappear? Because if it dominated every sea, if it hunted without real competition, if its size protected it from any predator, then who or what could subdue the Megalodon? Before getting to the causes of its decline, we must understand something fundamental: its ecological role. The Megalodon was a top predator. Their presence regulated entire populations of large marine mammals, balanced food chains, and shaped entire ecosystems. As it moved along migratory routes, it carried with it a trail of carrion, mutilated prey, and invisible terror. Like lions in the savannah or killer whales in today's seas, the Megalodon kept the populations of its prey under control. Without The balance collapsed. Its extinction was not just the disappearance of a predator, it was the collapse of an entire ecological pillar. When the titan falls, the plates of the world shake. And now, back to that troubling question. What could have killed a creature that, in theory, had no weaknesses? Some say that climate change was their executioner. Others, that new competitors pushed it to the abyss. But what if I told you that there are signs of something darker, something we've ignored all this time? To understand the fall of the Megalodon, we must delve not only into the waters where it hunted, but into the invisible changes that began to corrode the foundations of its empire. The story of its extinction is not a simple case of the climate changed and it died. No, it is a symphony of subtle factors, like palace intrigues that bring down an invincible king without anyone shooting an arrow. Let's start with the scenario. Approximately 3.6 million years ago, the Earth was entering a cooling cycle that would culminate in the Pleistocene ice ages. The poles were freezing, sea levels were falling, and the migratory routes of large whales were beginning to change dramatically. Whales were the Megalodon's main food, your pantry. When the waters cooled, those whales took refuge in colder seas, where the Megalodon, adapted to warm, temperate waters, could not follow them as easily. Imagine being the strongest lion in the savannah, but overnight, herds of buffalo disappear thousands of kilometers away in a climate where your body cannot survive. The Megalodon's hungry loneliness was not caused by a rival predator, but by the retreat of its prey. The executioner was the void, but there is more. In this same period, competing predators emerged that, although smaller, were devilishly efficient. The first ancestral killer whales and the primitive white sharks. These hunters, organized in groups or with refined techniques, began to occupy ecological niches previously exclusive to Megalodon. They couldn't face him face to face, but they could wear him down around the edges. Steal young prey. Attack in marginal areas where the colossus could not move with the same agility. It's the old story of the elephant and the ants. There is no need to knock down the giant with a single blow. It is enough to weaken it by 1,000 cuts, deprive it of food and force it to expend more energy than it consumes. And even more subtle was the change in the structure of marine ecosystems. New species of whales that were more agile, faster, and had longer migratory routes began to prosper. They were difficult prey for a predator that relied on close-range ambush attacks. The architecture of the prey had evolved, and the hunter, for the first time, was left behind. But perhaps most fascinating and disturbing is an often overlooked detail: reproduction. Megalodon, due to its enormous size and life cycle, probably had a very low reproductive rate. It is thought that, like today's sharks, it produced few but large and well-developed offspring, born alive. Breeding a single young Megalodon required decades of maturation, vast safe hunting areas, and an extremely fine ecological balance. When the balance was broken, the offspring began to die before reaching adulthood. And without young people to replace the elderly, the population began to quietly collapse. A giant without heirs is a doomed lineage. All of this converges towards a disturbing image: an ocean that cools, fleeing prey, competitors lurking like shadows, stagnant reproduction, not a sudden fall but a slow agony, a king who ages while the throne remains empty. And yet, still there is something that doesn't fit. Because even with all these factors, some paleontologists argue that Megalodon, with its adaptability and power, should have resisted longer, should have left more recent traces. It should have coexisted with the first marine human cultures, but it disappeared abruptly, leaving almost no fossil traces after a certain point. This is where less conventional theories appear like cracks in a polished surface. What if it wasn't just the weather? What if it wasn't just the dams? What if there was something else? Because when we reviewed the fossil sites, we found something chilling. The records of Megalodon disappeared almost simultaneously with the expansion of another creature that was beginning to alter ecosystems in radical ways. A creature that dominated not with fangs or fins, but with fire, tools, and incipient navigation. Yes, the first coastal humans. But is it really possible that such a primitive species had something to do with the disappearance of the largest marine predator of all time? It's not time to respond yet. First, we must look at the darkest mirror of all, the fossil legacy. Imagine a tusk that weighs more than your hand. It is not an ivory tusk, nor a sculpted claw. It's a tooth, only one. Triangular, sharp as an obsidian razor, with serrated edges designed not only to cut flesh, but to dismember, break bones, open ribs, as if they were petals of a tragic flower. That is the tangible legacy of the Megalodon. The first discovery that shook the foundations of paleontology was a set of these enormous teeth, discovered on different coasts of the world: South Carolina, Peru, Chile, Morocco, Japan. For centuries, these relics were interpreted in unusual ways. In the Middle Ages, Europeans knew them as dragon tongues, the tongues of stone, relics of mythical beasts that would have been exterminated by saints and heroes. They were even attributed healing powers when they were ground into powder and consumed as an antidote to poisons. It was not until the 17th century that the Danish naturalist Nicolas Steno, one of the fathers of modern geology, proposed something revolutionary. Those supposed dragon tongues were not magical relics. They were fossilized teeth of giant sharks. From that idea, the search for these titanic fangs became an obsession for paleontologists and adventurers. Megalodon's teeth are not only large, they are colossal. Some reach up to 18 centimeters in length, double or triple that of a modern great white shark. Its thickness and strength indicate a bite that exerted pressure of up to 18 tons, capable of crushing a whale's vertebrae with a single click. And where there are teeth, there must be a jaw. In the following years, scientists began to reconstruct the approximate dimensions of the animal from these remains. If we extrapolate the proportions of modern sharks, Megalodon would have measured between 15 and 20 meters long, with some extreme calculations suggesting even 25 meters. A predator as long as a train car, with a mouth that could swallow an adult human with little effort. But there is something more intriguing. Unlike other prehistoric animals, dinosaurs, extinct mammals, no complete skeletons of Megalodon have been preserved. Because, like all sharks, its skeleton was composed of cartilage, a soft tissue that rarely fossilizes. What remains are teeth, some calcified vertebrae and jaw fragments. It is as if nature had designed this titan with a body that fades into history, leaving only its weapons as proof of its existence. A warrior whose armor survives, but whose face we will never fully know. The locations of these fossils tell us another subtle story: the global distribution of Megalodon. From temperate coasts to tropical zones, its remains appear on all continents, except Antarctica. He was a conqueror of the seas, an oceanic emperor who knew no borders. And yet, as we move toward the most recent strata, from 2 to 3 million years ago, the frequency of these fossils decreases abruptly. They disappear from certain once prosperous coastal areas. They become scarce, fragmentary, until they cease completely. It is as if the colossus had slowly receded into the shadows, leaving an increasingly faint fossil echo. Today, expeditions to find Megalodon teeth remain an obsession for collectors and paleontologists. Divers risked their lives in remote areas of rivers and underwater cliffs just to extract a tusk that connects their hands with a monster that disappeared millions of years ago. They are sold at auctions, displayed in museums, traded as trophies of a predator that continues to fascinate the human imagination. But if the fossils are the physical trace, there is an even more disturbing vestige: the scars left on their prey. On bones of extinct whales, deep bite marks have been found that fit perfectly with the teeth of Megalodon. Clean cuts in ribs, fractures in cetacean skulls, crushed vertebrae. As if we had found ancestral crime scenes, where the murderer left his marks but never his body. Those scars are silent testimonies of the brutality and efficiency with which he hunted. He was not an occasional scavenger. It was an active predator, capable of taking down bus-sized creatures with meticulous strategy, attacking the fins to immobilize, then the ribs to kill. Each mark is a whisper: "I was here." However, the enigma persists. If the Megalodon disappeared 3.6 million years ago, why then do sporadic rumors arise of gigantic sharks sighted in the open sea? Perhaps like dragon legends, is there a possibility that this titan has survived in the depths we never fully explored? Before you dismiss it as fantasy, come with me into the darkest waters. Closing your eyes and diving into the ocean of 10 million years ago is an act of faith and danger. Because if we open our minds clearly enough, we can almost hear the dull echo of a fin skimming the water. An alien heartbeat that belongs to no creature we have ever seen. There, beneath the surface, a silhouette reigned that turned every living being into potential prey. Its name, Otodus Megalodon. Now let's decipher his body, not as a cold naturalist, but as a strategist, like a sculptor who studies a sword to understand not only its edge, but the intention of whoever wields it. His mouth was a living abyss. From side to side, it measured almost 3 meters wide, big enough to swallow 2 adults in a single bite without even touching their teeth. 276 teeth, in 5 rows, always renewing itself, an arsenal that never dulled. When one tooth wore down or fell out, another rose in its place like bullets from a biological machine gun. And those teeth didn't just cut, they tore. Fractured, tore with a precision that bordered on engineering. Its skull, reinforced with dense jaw muscles, could generate a bite force estimated between 180,500 y 180,200 newtons. To put it in perspective, that's 5 to 10 times the bite force of a modern great white shark, and up to 3 times stronger than Tyrannosaurus rex. If the T-Rex was the king of the earth, the Megalodon was the absolute emperor of the blue. His body, although poorly preserved, reveals keys through comparative fossil studies. Based on modern sharks, such as Carcharodon carcharias, great white shark, it is estimated that Megalodon had a robust body, wider and more muscular than its current relatives. This gave him 2 simultaneous advantages: speed and endurance. Unlike other marine predators that relied only on quick ambushes, the Megalodon could pursue its prey for long distances, a lethal ability in open seas where there was no escape. The structure of its pectoral fins also suggests exceptional control over navigation. It was not a blind torpedo that charged without direction. He was a marine strategist, capable of turning, braking, ambushing from below, emerging from the shadows and attacking the most vulnerable areas of his prey with perfect synchronicity. Its size not only gave it strength, but also an absence of natural predators. No other sea creature could even attempt to challenge him. Neither ancient killer sperm whales nor sharp-toothed whales like Leviathan melvilli could compete with the Megalodon's mix of size, speed, and bite. It was, in biological terms, an apex predator at its finest, a being whose only threat was time. But even the most perfect machines need fuel. The Megalodon's diet was commensurate with its size and power. Isotope studies on its teeth indicate that it hunted large cetaceans, young and adult baleen whales, ancient dolphins, giant pinnipeds, and even other sharks. Its strategy was so refined that it probably attacked the caudal fins or cervical vertebrae to first incapacitate and then consume. He did not devour in blind frenzy, dismembered with surgical calculation. Even Megalodon hatchlings, already born at an approximate size of 2 to 4 meters, were deadly miniatures that hunted big fish and other sharks from the beginning. There was no harmless childhood for this titan. They were born hunters. Another fascinating detail is its temperature. Unlike most modern sharks that are ectothermic, cold-blooded, Megalodon, like the great white shark and tuna, is believed to have possessed a form of regional endothermy. It could heat its muscles and vital organs, allowing it to swim at higher speeds and venture into colder waters when necessary. This feature would have greatly expanded its hunting range, giving it access to both tropical seas and more temperate latitudes. His accelerated metabolism, however, came at a price. To maintain that muscle mass and constant predatory activity, it needed to consume enormous amounts of food regularly. Some calculations suggest that an adult specimen must have ingested one medium-sized whale every week, or its equivalent in other smaller prey. This made him an insatiable motor, an engine, that, as we will see, began to fail when the balance of his world changed. For almost 20 million years, Otodus Megalodon ruled the waters with such absolute hegemony that the mere idea of its fall seemed inconceivable. How could an invincible titan, a hunter without rivals, become extinct? And yet, the story of the Megalodon is not one of a quick and violent death, but of a colossus slowly suffocated by a world that no longer needed it. The Earth, a few years ago, 3.6 million years, was beginning to lurch towards a new climate era. Her Pliocene, a time of transition, was transforming seas and continents in subtle but relentless ways. The poles began to form more stable ice sheets. The oceans, once warm and stable, were gradually cooling. As sea temperatures dropped, the migratory routes of whales, their main source of food, began to change dramatically. The whales, seeking colder waters rich in plankton, migrated to regions where the Megalodon, with its immense body and demanding metabolism, could not easily follow. Its endothermic system allowed it some thermal flexibility, but it was not unlimited. As their prey escaped southward and into deeper waters, their hunting territories became fragmented. But climate change was not his only sentence. The appearance of new competitors and emerging predators sealed their fate. Orcanus orca, the modern killer whale, began to diversify in this period. Although smaller than the Megalodon, the orca had a devastating evolutionary advantage: social intelligence. Unlike the solitary hunter that was the Megalodon, orcas hunted in coordinated pods, allowing them to take down large prey with a collective efficiency that surpassed brute strength. Worse still, they appeared macro-predator sperm whales, like Leviathan melville, a toothed colossus of up to 17 meters long, armed with the longest teeth of any known predator, up to 36 centimeters. These cetaceans hunted the same prey as the Megalodon, competing directly for young whales. Unlike the slow prey of the past, these new hunters were fast, intelligent, and adaptable. Furthermore, the coastal ecosystems they also changed. Sea levels fluctuated, reducing safe breeding grounds for Megalodon hatchlings. Some studies suggest that nursery areas, warm, shallow waters where calves grew up protected from larger predators, disappeared or became unsuitable, exposing the calves to emerging predators such as killer whales. A hungry giant, a cooling world, and new threats emerging, the perfect storm. And like a fire that goes out not suddenly, but when the wood is consumed, Megalodon populations began to gradually collapse. First, it disappeared from mid-latitude areas, then from the tropics, and finally from its last coastal refuges. Its last vestiges are found in tooth fossils dated approximately 2.6 million years, coinciding with the beginning of the Pleistocene. On that threshold, humanity itself began to take its first uncertain steps. It is fascinating to think that our most remote ancestors could walk on beaches whose seas still hid the last dying megalodons. Why didn't he leave direct descendants? Because their lineage had bet everything on an evolutionary strategy that, once dismantled, left no room for rapid adaptations. Their size, once their greatest advantage, became a liability when food was scarce. His specialization as a hunter of large prey did not allow him to adapt to more modest diets. The last megalodon did not die in an epic battle or under a spectacular cataclysm. It was probably a solitary, aged specimen, unable to hunt, that simply stopped finding food until it fainted, submerging without leaving witnesses. And yet, his shadow never completely disappeared. The oceans forgot its roar, but humans do not forget its teeth. The megalodon disappeared from the seas, but not from the memory of the earth. Their remains, spread across all continents, began to tell a silent story to whoever had the patience to listen to the stones. The first to stumble upon its vestiges were not scientists, but ancient people. In excavations around the Mediterranean and Asia, megalodon teeth have been found in archaeological contexts, carved as amulets or relics. The Greeks and Romans knew them as tongues of stone, glossopetrae, and they believed that fragments of the tongues of snakes petrified by the gods fell from the sky during electrical storms. Pliny the Elder mentioned them in his Natural History, attributing curative powers against poison. They did not know that they were holding in their hands the hunting weapons of a predator that had disappeared millions of years ago. It was not until 17th century when Nicholas Steno, a Danish pioneer of anatomy and geology, proposed a revolutionary idea. Those stone tongues were not magical artifacts, but fossilized teeth of ancient sharks. Thus was born, inadvertently, the modern paleontology. With the rise of scientific exploration in the 18th and 19th centuries, more teeth began to emerge in coastal sites in Europe, Asia, and America. The most iconic, teeth up to 18 cm with serrated edges like blades, perfectly preserved. Their size and shape were so enormous that some naturalists thought they belonged to dragons or legendary sea monsters. In 1835, the Swiss Louis Agassiz formalized the name Carcharodon megalodon, taking inspiration from the great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, due to dental similarities. However, centuries later, finer studies reclassified the species as Otodus megalodon, within an older lineage that diverged from the current white shark. As the sciences evolved, so did our collective imagination. The megalodon became a symbol of the immeasurable, a being that embodied both awe and terror of the unknown. The sailors' stories, adventure novels, and later cinema began to resurrect it in increasingly bold ways. At the end of the 20th century, a question began to stir on the margins of science and popular culture. What if he still lived? The discovery of giant squid, Architeuthis, and fish considered extinct, such as the coelacanth, fueled the fantasy that maybe, just maybe, Megalodon had managed to survive in the bottomless ocean trenches far from human reach. Sensational documentaries, horror novels, and films embraced this hypothesis with enthusiasm. In 2013, a mockumentary aired on the Discovery Channel called Megalodon, The Monster Shark Lives. He hinted with a fictitious montage that there was evidence of his current survival. The audience, mesmerized, relived for weeks the idea of a megalodon prowling submarines and devouring whalers. Although quickly denied, the echo was recorded. Millions of people began to search for sightings, share dubious videos, and speculate on internet forums. However, the scientific evidence is overwhelming. There are no traces of living Megalodon. No fossils after 2.6 million years ago, no genetic records, no recent remains. And if it existed today, its colossal food requirements, hundreds of kilos of whale meat daily, would leave a trail impossible to hide. But perhaps the true survival of the Megalodon is not physical, but symbolic. His image has been embedded in films such as The Me, in video games, in tattoos, t-shirts, and even in conspiracy theories. It represents something that transcends its biology. The human fascination with the limits of the known, the vertigo in the face of the colossal, and the unfathomable mystery of the oceans. Somehow, the Megalodon lives on in every story we tell about it. It does not need to swim in the depths to continue devouring our imagination. The Megalodon did not fall for a single cause. Its extinction, which occurred approximately 2.6 million years, was the result of a chain of events that, together, formed the perfect storm. First of all, the weather changed drastically. At the end of Pliocene, the Earth began to cool progressively. The poles were covered in ice, sea levels fell, and marine ecosystems suffered profound alterations. The warm coastal waters that served as nurseries for Megalodon hatchlings disappeared or shrank dramatically. Without these sanctuaries, the already vulnerable calves faced higher mortality rates. At the same time, prey became scarce. Many of the whale species that formed the core of the Megalodon's diet migrated to colder waters or saw their populations depleted by environmental changes. Without a stable supply of high-energy food, a creature with such a colossal metabolism began to lose ground. They were not alone in the oceans. New competitors emerged. The ancestral killer whales, Orcinus cytoniensis, smaller, intelligent, and adaptable. And above all, the sperm whale macroraptor, Leviathan melvillei, a whale apex, predator with teeth as long as a human forearm. These species hunted some of the same prey and had pack or ambush hunting strategies that complicated Megalodon hegemony. Altogether, the collapse of its ecosystem, the food shortage, the loss of breeding habitats, and the fierce competition slowly pushed the species into the abyss. There was no sudden cataclysm or great mass extinction. It was a slow agony, a disappearance that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years until the last Megalodon stopped plying the waters. The sea did not register his departure with a roar. No epitaph was recorded. Only the slow settling of sediments on bones and teeth guarding the memory of a titan that once dominated the oceans. When the first Megalodon teeth were found by modern humans, no one really knew what they were. In medieval Europe, fossils of these colossal teeth, hard as stone and shaped like a sharp triangle, were known as tongues of stone or tongues of stone. Many believed that they were the petrified tongues of dragons or giant snakes fallen from the heavens in ancient mythical battles. It was only in the 17th century, thanks to the pioneer of paleontology, Nicholas Steno, which was recognized as its true nature, fossilized teeth of ancient sharks. Today, Megalodon fossils, mainly teeth, vertebrae, and jaw fragments, have been found in all continents except Antarctica. These fossils are not only scientific relics, they are objects of worship, coveted collector's pieces, and inexhaustible source of legends. The most persistent myth is that of his alleged survival. Over the centuries, sailors, explorers, and monster hunters have reported encounters with sharks of enormous dimensions. Movies, sensational documentaries, and novels have fueled the idea that in the unexplored depths of the ocean, a living Megalodon could still swim, hidden from humanity. However, science is blunt. There is no serious evidence of its current existence. A predator of its size would leave clear signs in modern ecosystems, attacks, corpses, marks, or even traces of environmental DNA. But if nature sealed his fate, modern science opens a disturbing door. With the rise of paleogenomics and extraction techniques, ancient DNA, some scientists have begun to theorize about the possibility of reconstructing, at least partially, the genetic code of extinct species. Although Megalodon DNA has not been preserved, the marine environment is hostile to its preservation. Some researchers are exploring parallels with living relatives like the great white shark to understand its biology and perhaps, in the distant future, recreate some of its characteristics. Today, Megalodon not only inhabits museums and fossil strata, but also the collective imagination. It has become a symbol of mystery, of the unknown, and of the titanic forces that once ruled a world. We are only beginning to understand. The Megalodon is gone, but its shadow remains. Not as a terrifying specter, but as a profound reminder of the impermanence even of the titans. His story is an echo of how life, no matter how colossal it may seem, is always subject to the invisible threads of change. In each fossilized tooth, in each petrified vertebra, a subtle message is hidden. Nothing reigns forever. The ocean, once their undisputed domain, continues to pulsate with new forms of life, new balances. And yet, deep within us, in that ancient part that still dreams of sea monsters and forgotten giants, the Megalodon swims on. In myths, in science, in the vastness of our insatiable curiosity. Because perhaps its true immortality is not in the seas, but in our collective memory. The Titan sleeps, but its story never stops moving.